Check out today's work of OtakuDaiKun fan art. Nice! We've got Dai-chan pulling out a Ro Ayas. She must protect the fandom. Thank you so much, Lucas. Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun. Dai here, and today we're going to be talking about parody art. In the debate over how women should be represented in media, I'm sure you must have seen at least one of these drawings that I'll classify as gender reverse parodies. Mind you, this is not gender-bent art, where an artist tries to reimagine a character as another gender. A lot of times those are really awesome. Nah, what I'm referring to are specifically parodies, in which an artist will try to show the absurdity of female representation by drawing a man in a similar outfit or pose. That or an outfit that's equally revealing and exploitative on a man's body. The idea is simple. Take a popular female drawing, likely from an anime, comic, or video game, and draw a much more masculine dude presented the same way. The artist's goal is to get you to think, wow, that looks really ridiculous when you do it to a man, in an attempt to demonstrate that the original female art is equally ridiculous. Quite obviously, these parodies do point out how we often present men and women differently, but honestly that's as far as they go. For this video, I want to go over the many ways in which this type of art fails at conveying its point. Even further, I hope to show that this art is actually rather insulting, not to the fans of attractive babes, but to the same LGBT demographic that feminists typically ally with. The most glaring fallacy is fairly basic. Equal presentation does not render equal results. Assuming we as viewers actually agree that the man dressed scantily and effeminate looks ridiculous, that doesn't necessarily mean we suddenly think the female version is. It's like saying that because a square peg won't fit into a round hole, a round peg won't fit either. As the saying goes, women are the fairer sex, and because of that, they can get away with wearing a wider variety of outfits. The point is that feminine features look good on a woman, whereas that's not guaranteed for a man. In short, what is flattering to a woman may be ridiculous for a man, and vice versa. To be more specific though, it's more so that we tend to call things feminine because they're flattering on a female form. To that end, it's possible to have a more butch or masculine woman struggling to pull off the same outfit and pose. By the same token, there are some men who are effeminate enough to pull it off, perhaps even better than some women. Astolfo, for instance, looks great in women's clothes because he himself is very feminine. Try putting a schoolgirl outfit on a big burly dude, however, and it might perhaps look a bit silly. The contrast between the masculine and feminine elements is what comes off as jarring. Thus, the main reason these drawings fail is that, while you can say a feminine pose on a guy is strange, that doesn't inherently mean that a feminine pose on a woman is equally strange. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. A lot of times, the male version in the drawing looks ridiculous because that was the artist's goal from the get-go. The images are meant to be mocking, and that mentality affects the end result. In order to make a proper comparison, these artists would need to properly replicate the style and techniques of the original to ensure the problem doesn't simply lie with the artists themselves. Again, there are gender-bent works that are pretty cool. Let's face it though, a lot of these Tumblrite artists are anything but professional, and aren't drawing out of passion but rather advocacy. They're trying to prove a point, not perfect their technique. Imagine if we got the original artists on board, however. Get one of those legends from Marvel Comics to draw the Hulk in a Scarlett Johansson pose. For all I know, that could wind up fantastic. Instead, however, these parodies come off as too simplistic or lazy to take seriously. Ironically, by using their own art skills to create these parodies, they're only showing off the poor quality of their work. Even more ironically, had these artists done their best to make the parodies look good, then we could probably no longer say they look ridiculous. Perhaps the most damning fallacy, however, is that these artists are trying to claim guys in effeminate presentation look ridiculous to begin with. Isn't that rather insensitive? After all, more often than not, drawing men in effeminate clothes and poses creates a sort of homoerotic flamboyance. Characters like Mephistopheles, Tingle, and Voldo seem so jarring because a mostly heteronormative society isn't used to confronting such overt male eroticism. The fact that many people are made uncomfortable by this says less about how ridiculous it is for women and more about how our society is less accepting of flamboyant male sexuality. Rather than trying to establish these images as absurd, shouldn't feminists be more concerned with encouraging their acceptance? Rather than saying, look at how creepy Voldo looks, don't you realize Ivy is just as absurd? Shouldn't they be saying, if you happen to like Ivy, you should get used to characters like Voldo too, it's only fair. Honestly, if there were a Voldo for every Ivy out there, I could definitely live with that. Either way, my point is that the reason people typically find the male gender swaps absurd is due to homophobia, and feminists should probably be avoiding that rhetoric to make their argument. Now, to be fair, I think it's safe to assume what feminists are trying to accomplish by making these parodies. Their motive is to convince creators to represent women the same way they do men. If the guys are going to be in action poses, so should the women. If the guys are going to be fully clothed, so too should the women. It's a reasonable thing to ask. Even if I've established that hyper-feminine women aren't ridiculous in the way the parodies try to claim, that doesn't mean a more modest, neutrally posed woman is a bad thing. I'm certainly not here to argue that such characters should not be in fiction. What I am trying to point out, however, is that a major goal in a lot of feminist rhetoric is to try and erase the concept of femininity, or at least combat it at every turn, boiling everything down into a neutral stew. It's based off a false assumption that the way men are presented in fiction is neutral, ignoring that men are also being exploited for our excitement. As it turns out, there was a time when male fashion was overtly sexual in the way these artists claim is absurd. Just look at this guy. Ain't he a sexy dude? Apparently, back in the day when codpieces were popular, this was seen as flattering for a man. Is it now? Generally no, not anymore. But just because male fashion isn't this inherently explicit doesn't mean modern fictional men aren't designed to be glamorized in their own way. The only difference is that cultural sensibilities have changed. Men are now typically admired for their broad shoulders and chests, more so than the bulge in their pants. While Captain America in this picture isn't showing off his ass, make no mistake, he was posed in this picture to maximize his attractiveness. It's not just a battle pose, it's a pose that dynamically shows off the stretch of his abs as they rise into his bulging biceps. Heck, with the exception of Iron Man, all of the guys in this image are posed to maximize this brawn. Sure, there are definitely people out there who crave a Captain Bubble Butt, but I'd like to believe that most people who are attracted to men would prefer the original poses. Their solidarity and determination also play a huge role in their attractiveness. My point is, Marvel went with these poses because in general, people like them. Magic Mike and Chip and Dale aren't the only flavors hot men come in. If codpieces were still in vogue, it's quite possible Cap would be wearing one. When we go back to the parody art, I find that the issue is less about whether women are more sexualized than men, and more about how our contemporary society defines attractiveness. There are certain things that are very flattering for the feminine that don't necessarily work in reverse. Sometimes sexualizing a man isn't simply a matter of taking off their clothes. A guy's tuxedo can be just as sexy on a man as a tight cocktail dress on a woman. If a shirtless guy were the equivalent of a topless woman, we'd be arresting dudes at the beach left and right for public indecency. As a result, the war cry of these artists is less about creating equality for the sexes, and more about being angry that most of us really enjoy the current beauty standards that exist. They aren't trying to say something like, if we have push-up bras, then we should bring back codpieces, but rather, stop enjoying cleavage! It comes off as trying to destroy something they don't like, rather than fixing something that's actually causing harm. Rather than advocating for a representation they want to see more of, they try to turn the current representation into a great evil. Ideally, creators should all be able to follow their passions. If someone finds bikinis on women to be the most attractive, and they have no interest in men, then let them put all the women in bikinis while the men are fully clothed. If a creator were more attracted to Captain America with his bulge out, they should probably try to present him that way. Go ahead, put it in the movies. We'll find out who actually goes to see it. Otherwise, they can be just content drawing it for themselves. Similarly, if a creator wants to put all their men in G-strings and clothe all their women, they should go for that too. It's all fair game, and none of it's absurd, which is why these works of parody art just don't, well, work. As it stands right now, it just seems that most creators want to dress their women down and pose them in feminine ways. That doesn't mean alternatives don't exist or aren't viable. It just means that creators who want something different need to go out there and make it, and hopefully it'll grow a large following. What I suspect is that we'll wind up with more options that suit everyone, rather than having one passion thrive off the failure of another. My point is, don't go mocking female designs, especially if your best argument is stating how ridiculous flamboyant men look. If you have something you want to see, go make it yourself. No joke, go out there and make it happen. That's what all the creators whose works were parodied did. If it's not easy for you to learn how to do it, then it probably wasn't any easier for them. But yeah, what do you, my audience, think about these gender reversal parodies? Have they ever convinced you that women need different representation? There's a lot to talk about this, and I appreciate everyone who discusses with me in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this channel, help me beat the algorithm by liking, commenting, and sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and, most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of my anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content. If you want to support me directly, there are now 3 ways that all provide the same benefits. You can click Join here on YouTube, or join Patreon or Subscribestar for access to exclusive vids and early access. As always, celebrate your fandom.